Hello everybody and welcome to my first video. In this video I'm going to teach you how to do brakes. So this is the rear brake on my 1990 Celica. On some vehicles, the parking brake adjuster, also known as the star adjuster wheel, will be located, you'll be able to locate it in the front through this little hole right here. Mine is not set up like that, but first things first, I'm gonna teach you how to do the brakes and rotors. So on the back of mine, typically this top one is a bolt and this one is a bolt. This one, I don't know if it's set up like a bolt, so we will find out together. First things first, you're gonna wanna lift the car. So you can see underneath it, there's this little pinch weld that goes along the whole bottom of it. And so I got my puck there lifting the car from the pinch weld. You can lift it anywhere on that pinch weld and it'll be fine. Other cars, like I have a Jeep that it'll have a full frame and you can lift anywhere on that frame. And then some cars have specific points that they want you to lift from. It'll look like a little square on the underside of the car. Remember, safety first, always use a jack stand. You got to take off this little bolt right here at the bottom of your caliper. The caliper is what actually compresses your brake pads. All right, now that I've got that bolt removed, I'm going to get a small pry bar and I'm going to pry in between these two pieces because this is the caliper and this is the mounting bracket. So you want to pry in between those two pieces and flip the caliper up. Now I've propped up the flashlight so you can see me do it. You just want to give it a good old pry up to get it away from the rotor. Just like that. So this little piece here is a slide pin and mine appears to be seized, so I'm just going to take the caliper off with the bracket. I already took off my brake shoes, which would sit right in here, and they make contact with the rotors and helps the vehicle to stop. All right, so now we're on the step of taking the bolts off the bracket. So I conveniently have a socket stuck on this bolt back here. It is mounted directly to the hub, so it has a solid place to stay and keep it in place while it is in operation. And then here is the other bolt where my finger's touching. I know it's hard to see. Once you get it off, you'll notice that this is the piston and it is protruding out. And we don't want that when we put the new brakes on because the new brake pads are going to be thicker and they won't fit. So you're going to want to compress that. They make these nice, there's a bunch of different styles of caliper compressor. This one is one of my favorites. All it is a little ratcheting and these plates push outward. You can get them pretty cheap at like any AutoZone or anything like that. Now with the caliper off like this, you got to be very careful because this is a fragile high pressure line, and if that leaks and breaks, you will lose all brake pressure. But I like to get these caliper hangers from AutoZone. They're just a couple bucks. But since this slide pin is broken, I believe this is, or seized, I believe this is a cap, and so I'm going to spray some PB Blast and try to remove this cap because I believe there's a bolt under it. Now that slide pin does appear to be seized and I got the cap off and there is a bolt in there and it's pretty deep in there and I can't get the right size socket that I need to get in there. So I've put the bracket bolts back in part of the way, not fully, as you can see as it's still loose, just enough to give me some leverage so I can crank on this. You can see all this rust right here. That's all on the slide pin and we need that to break free so we can compress the slide pin and get the head of the bolt out to where we can actually pull it out. So the reason why I'm using PB Blaster and not heat to dislodge all that rust in the slide pin is because you only have a piston on one side. So you will, if you're just using the piston, this side does nothing. So as the piston compresses the back side against the rotor, the slide pin will move back and it'll in turn compress the front side against the rotor. And so if you use heat and you warp it, or you can warp it or you can damage your internals for your actual caliper. unfortunately, this pin is really seized and I was not able to get it out. I tried most everything I know I could. I even tried putting the brake back on and pressing on the brake pedal to try to get that slide pin to move, and it is really seized in there. So I did a cardinal sin. I destroyed the boot. You'd never want to do that because the boot keeps all the dust and dirt away from your slide pin so it doesn't get seized like mine. All right, so this is a slide pin I thought was seized, or that was seized. And I thought I needed heat to take care of it, but all I did was grab a socket that I didn't care about. As you can see, it's kind of mushroomed at the top. If you can tell that, it's kind of hard to tell on the camera. But all I did was figured out that it is slightly smaller than the bolt, and it fit right in the hole. So I sat it on there and I beat it with a hammer. Now the next step is to get your rotor off. Now whoever put my rotor on did it wrong, because you're supposed to line up that hole that I showed you earlier with one of these 3 holes, and that's so you can get to your star adjuster wheel, just in case your parking brake is out just a little bit too much. You can adjust it in and have an easier time pulling it off. I just had to brute force this off, which I hate doing. Granted, I'm replacing all the springs and the hardware in here and the new shoes. So the next step is to make sure I have all the correct parts and to take pictures of what I'm taking apart as I disassemble it, so that I can know what parts go where and have a reference point for later if I ever forget. To make sure I got the correct parts, I like to line them up, make sure they are the same size and they line up properly and have all the same bolt holes. Now I have this nifty set that I got for about $30 on Amazon, and it's got your pliers for springs, and it's got these tools right here for these guys in here, so you don't have to use pliers and a bunch of other stuff. You can just take that tool, press it on there, and twist. If you don't want to spend $35 to get that, you can just use screwdrivers and a pair of pliers. Now for these springs here, it's got this pin, which mine looks bent, but it goes all the way to the back, and you can see right there in my little backing plate, my hub right here has a hole right there, so you can put your finger on it, hold it, and then you get your pliers, or if you get the tool, you just hold that with your finger, press in and twist, and then it comes apart. So it's just a little cap, a spring, that pin, and then a backing plate. And then that's what holds your brake pad or your brake shoe in place for your parking brake. Okay, so now just like that spring is for holding the brake shoes to the hub, these 2 up top are to align it at the top. And then there is one down here at the bottom. Let's see if we can find that. Oh, right there. So that one is to hold them together. So now this is all the hardware from my parking brake. So this is one clip, this is the other. I left the pins in there. This one, actually upon further inspection, looks like it's purpose built, which looks like you could have just made it a straight line, but I'm not the engineer. Those are the 2 springs that hold it up top. That goes on that bracket, and that bracket sits right about here, and it just rests in between the parking brakes, or the brake shoes, and that's a little spacer so they don't get too close and get bunched up. Now all I have left is there's a clip on the back to hold the brake shoes to the actual parking brake lever. There's the star adjuster wheel, and then there is the spring holding the shoes together. And now that it's all out, we're ready to put in the new parts. Now one trick I use for the horseshoe clips is I take a pair of pliers and I put one end on the post and one end on the back of the clip, and I just squeeze, because these can be a pain in the butt to get on by hand. Now I forgot to explain what your star adjuster wheel is and does. So it's this little adjustment piece right here, right behind that spring. And what it does is every time you pull your parking brake, it adjusts 1 click. So then when you release it, it is adjusted so it's just slightly not touching your brake rotor. So then you get a nice strong grip every time you press your parking brake. Now with the new parking brake shoes and hardware on, next it's time to put on the rotor. Before I do that, I'm going to put the rotor on backwards, spray it down with brake clean because they come with a protective film on them to keep them from rusting or corroding while they're in shipment and transport. So now that I've sprayed down the back of it and put it on correctly, we're gonna spray it down the front to ensure that it stays nice and clean while we put on our caliper and brake pads now. The new pads didn't come with hardware, which I'm not a fan of, so I'm gonna have to reuse the old pads hardware, which isn't bad, it'll work in a pinch, but I prefer the new stuff. But look how much thicker that new pad is than the old one. Now when you're putting your bracket back on, or any part really, you wanna make sure that you first start both of the bolts before you start tightening the bolts. Because if you tighten down one end, then you can misalign holes and have to untighten them to have them aligned properly, and then you can start tightening them. And it's really important to start all the bolts on a project that you have to torque down. Like these ones, I'm gonna get them on there and I'm gonna get them snugged up. That's it. Now, if I had to torque these down, I would have put them both on, tightened them, and then got them just snug, and then got a torque wrench out and torqued them. But that's not the case for these. I can just get them tied enough. Now we're gonna put this on in reverse order of how we took it off. So I gotta put the hardware back into the bracket, put the bracket back onto the rotor, grease all the 4 points of hardware, put the brake pads in, and then slide my caliper over the brake pads, and then put in my last caliper bolt. And then we're done. And now with all the points of hardware greased, it is time to put in the brake pads. And it should fit snugly just like that. On this rear pad, you might notice this bit of metal and ask yourself what that is. So you see how it dips just below the bracket part and onto the brake pad? So this is called a chirper. This notifies you when your brake pads are getting really low and you have to replace them. And with the brake pads on, we slide the caliper back on and replace the bolt. And now once your brakes are all back together, what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna get in the car and pump the brakes until it is stiff. You don't have to turn the car on, you just wanna pump them until it gets stiff, because compressing that piston will send all the fluid back up to the reservoir, and then the piston is not gonna be touching the brake pads quite just yet. So you wanna press the brake pads, it'll push the piston out and press on the pads, and then once it gets stiff, you know that your brake pads are being pressed properly and that your piston is realigned. And now we're in here and we just pump the brakes, and after one pump I can already feel it get stiff because they're brand new pads. And that is how you do your pads and rotors. That one is for the rear. The front is exactly the same, except you don't have the parking brake in the front, so it's a little easier.